buddy, buddy, buddy. Wish I missed the past, buddy, buddy, but there's still Buddycast. No, don't be naughty, go meet everybody here on Buddycast.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder and host of Buddycast, Nick Sorensen.
Welcome, everybody, to your favorite show on earth, Buddycast. I'm your host, Nick Sorensen. Thank you for joining us on this lovely evening. We have a phenomenal guest, one who's got a lot of history behind her, a lot of great work. She's got a lot of credibility. I'm excited for this episode, as you can tell. My new buddy, Amy Lago. How you doing, Amy?
I'm great. How are you? And I love the theme song.
Thank you very much.
I was grooving out.
I'm very honored to have you on the show tonight. So let's dive right into it. Amy, you're a cartoon editor. How did you find that career? What led you to become a cartoon editor?
Well, first of all, I should say it was totally by accident. But I should preface it by saying that my graduate degree is in TV, radio, and film production. Mm-hmm. So I have a sequential brain, thinking about how you set up stories. Mm-hmm. So that piece at least was there. And the piece of video production where you're thinking visually, you're thinking how to set up shots. So I got my graduate degree at Syracuse University. I went to New York City because I couldn't wait to shake the dust off my tail feathers and leaving Central New York where I grew up. And eventually ended up at a video production company, and it specialized in videos for the financial market, which actually stood me a good stud later, but that's another story. And that there was a financial crisis happening. This is the later 80s. And I was like, I need to find something else to do. And I saw this ad for a job that was for a syndicate for comics editing. And I was like, this sounds like a good thing. Mm-hmm. So I applied, and I had some editing experience, not just editing the scripts for the video production company, but I had also done some freelance editing for a magazine. My boyfriend at the time he was and is an illustrator. His name is Ray Lago. He works in the comic book world. And so I just thought, okay, this sounds great. And so I interviewed for the job, and I was talking with Sarah Gillespie, who would become my boss. And you may know, she was famous at the time and still kind of famous. She found Dilbert. She developed a lot of strips before I got there. And also her brother is Howard Ashman, who was the lyricist for Little Shop of Horrors, Little Mermaid.
Wow.
Beast. Yeah. So she's just like this truly tremendously talented, wise person. And we interviewed, and I think maybe she wasn't convinced, or maybe she was just being wise. She had me interview with the woman who I was going to replace if I got the job, a woman named Diana. And Sarah had said to her, just tell her what the job is, entailing. And so I'm sitting there in the cubicle with Diana, and she's describing this whole job. Like, I read the comics, and here's what I do. And there's this pile of submissions for people who want to be syndicated. And I looked them over, and she said, do you have any questions for me? And I just stared at her. And I said, yeah. Why are you leaving? And she knew right away where my brain was going. She said, Sarah's a great boss. I want to do my own writing. I want to be a reporter. That's why I'm leaving. And I was like, oh, okay, fine. And so I got the job offer.
Nice.
Yeah, I know. But I was like, why on earth would you leave this job? You're sitting in your office all day and reading comics and getting paid for it. Like, this is.
That's like my dream job right there.
Yes. And as a matter of fact, many years later, at one point, United Feature Syndicate was thinking of asking Michael Moore, the film person, Bowling for Columbine, and et cetera, to write a column, an opinion column. And I wasn't involved at the meeting because I was more comics side. But I just happened to enter the elevator with him as he was coming upstairs. And I introduced myself. And he was, he didn't push me off at all. He was like kind of a reporter kind of person. So what do you do? I'm the comics editor. And he said, what does that mean? It means I sit in my office all day and I get paid a lot of money to read comic strips. and he said, the best question I have ever gotten when I had given that response, what do your parents think of that? And I said, with a completely straight face, they think I have a terrific scam going and they are very proud of me. So like I said, I got into it completely by accident, although there was people who are of the right age will remember that there were Peanuts compilation books, like about this big. And we had them all, and I read them all. And it's weird for me to be an editor because I have a tracking problem. And I didn't really understand what my problem was until I was an adult. But it occurred to me much later, those books with the globs of words helped me learn to track, right? Because panel, and it's in a block, right? So it's much easier to read it than it is this long piece of text when you're going like this. So I guess it's not surprising. Ended up, if I was going to be an editor, and I guess I have that bent because I'm always trying to make things, perfect things. I told my first boss that I looked at editing as a game. And the object of the game was to find as many mistakes as possible. And then the secondary object was to let as many mistakes go as possible. Because if it's not necessarily a mistake, right? It might be an intentional voice thing or a pause thing or something.
Or like a little kid saying something that's misspelled because that's how they're saying it.
Right. Like or, phrasing because that's the way somebody would phrase it. Or, right. Before I got there was an editor who had changed something when my boss was out it was a Shultz thing. And Charlie Brown says, I can't even hope good. And apparently the editor changed it to, I can't even hope well.
Wow.
This is an 800-pound gorilla. Why do you change any of this stuff? Right? So, poor Sarah had to fall on her sword and say, it'll never happen again. I don't know why this happened. I never have been able to find that strip. I haven't looked hard, but.
Well, if you find it, let us know.
I don't think I'll have time to find it.
So, I gotta ask now, what does your day-to-day job entail? Like, what's the day-to-day life of a cartoon editor?
So before I moved to Counterpoint, honestly, it was a lot of cat herding and reminding cartoonists that their stuff was due. particularly at United. I was responsible for 40 different features at United. And I have found that there are two kinds of cartoonists. The ones who have a lead on their deadline, and they want to maintain that lead. And that lead might be 6 months. I think at one point Scott Adams was 6 months ahead. I think that Stefan Pastis might have also been close to that. Dave Blazek was another one who's always wanted to have a lead. Brian Crane, who does pickles, also wanted to have a good lead. And so they want to maintain their lead. And if they know they have a trip coming up, they're going to work that much harder and they're going to get ahead that much farther. And then there are the ones who need the pressure of the deadline. Like it has to be in by this time. And they will just kind of wait and see if maybe that deadline isn't really real. Mm. And that could be hard. I actually had a staff at United. I think there were 4 people on my staff, and we were dealing with that many features. And you're talking about at the time having to ensure that it gets off to the pre-press and printing operation. Deadlines have tightened significantly since those days. It used to be really serious problems if deadlines were missed then. But I remember just my poor staff was just frantic. We would be absolutely frantic. And I started calling all the late people and just saying, look, you've got to get this in sooner. Your deadline is Tuesday. Today is Thursday. You need to get this in on Tuesdays. Please do this. And one cartoonist in particular, who shall remain nameless, took umbrage at that. He's like, I know what day of the week it is. Like, I can't believe you would say that to me. And I had to go back to him and say, okay, well, in hindsight, you're right. I should have known that you would know what day of the week it is because you are employed with a newspaper. However, my husband, my now ex-husband, is an artist, and he works pretty much 7 days a week and never knows what day of the week it is. So I was kind of used to that.
Mm-hmm. You're just doing your job.
Just trying to get you to file on time.
Mm-hmm.
Please don't tell me you're taking an insult because I'm asking you to file on time.
Exactly. You're just doing your job, making sure all your pieces are coming together.
Yeah, I mean, I was telling them, look, my staff is ready to jump out the window, and we're only on the 4th floor, so they're not going to die. They're just going to get injured really badly.
Oh my!
And I'm going to let them sue you.
Ooh.
But those are, you deal with that. At some point you get used to it. Like, okay, these people, they need the wrangling. They need the reminder, hey, don't forget, I need your stuff tomorrow. Please don't forget, I need your stuff tomorrow. And then the holidays come. Mm-hmm. And you're like, okay, I actually need your stuff a week ahead of time. And they're like, oh, come on, you don't really need it a week ahead of time. I'm telling you that there's a pagination system now. The paginators need it a week ahead of time in order to supply it to their clients. So a paginator is a company that they get all the comics and they have these programs, and their programs automatically place the comics where they need to go. Back when I first started, everything was sent to into this photo system, and you got a black and white printout, and the pre-press people would hand cut the strips, and they had a layout page that already had the byline on top. Place them. This is when we were sending them out to papers, right? So it's 6 dailies on a page, and they're hand placing them. They're putting them through a waxer that puts wax on the back. And so that was what it was like. So paginators took electronic files and just went and automated the entire process.
Made the whole process like 10 times easier.
It was like a push of a button instead of,
1, 2,
slit,
3,
slit, wax.
Yep.
Slit, wax. It was a huge change in process. So that made it faster. It made the deadlines closer, but it's still they're all pushing the deadlines. I had one cartoonist. I used to call him my Wednesday morning coronary, because the Wednesday before Monday on the dailies was his deadline, and it was like actually Wednesday at 11 a.m. And so he was my Wednesday morning coronary.
Nice.
Yeah.
So speaking of cartoonists, you worked with some notable cartoonists. One of them being our buddy Dave Blazek. Dave's told his side of the story. I want to hear your side of the story of how you found Dave Blazek.
Dave found me. So I was flying to the Rubens, and I'm trying to remember where they were. I don't remember which Rubens this was, but I had a connection in Philly. So I ran into a fellow cartoonist in Philly who I knew, who introduced me to Dave. And Dave was like, "Hi, how you doing?" Da, 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 da. So later on, Dave said to me that the cartoonist said to him, "You know who that was, right?" It's like, what do you mean?
Yeah, what do you mean?
What do you mean? And he said, I had to tell him that you were Amy Lago. And it's like, what do you mean? like you were Amy Lago.
The Amy Lago.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. And so then Dave contacted me, and I, cut him. I was like, here's a deal. Let's do this.
Nice.
And he changed. Yeah, so it was really nice. It was very nice. I loved working with Dave. I loved working everybody, even my Wednesday morning coronary, who actually I absolutely adore.
Even the ones that can be the most stress, the most headache, and the ones that make you take the most Tylenol. You're still. It's a good thing I love you.
Yeah. Well, talent, it wins out, right?
Exactly.
I got to work with all these really, really, really talented, funny people. So it's a big blessing as far as I'm concerned. So
the one artist I am ecstatic to hear about your work with is one of my personal favorites, Charles M. Shultz. I got to ask how that opportunity came to be, how that all came to be.
It just was part and parcel of working for United Feature Syndicate. So I was kind of the low man on the editing totem pole initially, and then moved up. And but I still, from day one, I was proofreading the peanut strips that came in, and eventually Sarah decided to leave, and I was promoted, and I was really kind of in charge of the department, so therefore I was in charge of all of the features. And I did not like to, I am a bit of a retentive and control freak, and I didn't like to let anything out without actually reading it. So I read them all, and he and I just got to be friendly and chatted, and you're sitting there in awe of somebody who taught you to read, right? because that's really how I looked at it. But he was also a mentor in so many ways. Just one of the things that shocked me was when I learned that when he was laying out a comic strip, he did the words first.
Really?
He did the lettering first because the lettering could dictate how the art was laid out. Because in his mind, and this is true, you had to hear the voices in order, right? So it's like setting up a scene with a movie. Makes complete sense. You know, you're hearing a voice, you need to know you've got to have that person first, right? So if the gag is an oral gag, he wrote out the lettering first. And interestingly enough, of my 3 Peanuts originals, 2 of them have no words.
Wow. Now you know I gotta ask, who's your favorite Peanuts character?
I don't think I have one.
Not even a top 3?
Well, you know, I think it's got to be Snoopy, but it's mostly because of all the personas that Snoopy has, right?
Yes.
So, right? Flying Ace, Literary Ace, Joe Cool, the brother Spike and Dal and Andy. So it's probably Snoopy, but you know,
Yes.
but you know, Charlie Brown serves a big function.
Absolutely.
Lucy, you know, I have a real fondness for Lucy when she was cranky. She had stopped being cranky, but she still had a lot of pride. And actually, there was a series of books that were starting to be published, and the book publishers kind of changed hands. The company that was dealing with it changed hands. It's a long and drawn out story, but they started, the first book was Snoopy, Not Your Average Dog. And the next one was Charlie Brown, Not Your Average Boy. And the third one was supposed to be Lucy, Not Your Average Crab. And I was like, you know, she's not, that's so, you know, that's very 70s, 60s and 70s. And so I talked to the editor and I said, what would you think of seeing if Sparky would go for Lucy, not just another pretty face? And so I suggested that to her, and I was at the meeting where she suggested it to Sparky. And after the meeting, she turned to me and I didn't notice this. She said, "Did you see his face? He lit up like that's so much better." And it was because it was more reflective of that time, right?
All I can say is, all I can picture is just the comic strips with Lucy. I'm not crabby.
I also have a very, very huge soft spot for Linus.
Yes.
So it's hard to say. It's really hard to say. I was lucky enough to be involved with when they brought You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown back to Broadway, the revival. And I actually got to go to Skokie to see the preview. And I gave them my notes. Like, this is a very, what's the word I am looking for? Presumptuous thing to do, to just turn to the director, who is a very, 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 very well-known Broadway director, and just say, okay, could you think you could try to do this? And what about this? And da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like...
And meanwhile, he's thinking, who is this lady?
No, he knew who I was. We actually had a great time. He came out to, he and I both went out to Santa Rosa and hung out with Sparky. And then we hung out having beers in my room. at the
Nice.
hotel afterwards. And he is a great director. He's a lovely, lovely, lovely person. And I can't tell you how gratifying it was for him to actually listen to me and not say, who is this? What she thinks she is, right?
That's what I mean. Like, who is this lady? Like, what?
Right.
What
What does she know about Broadway?
Mm-hmm.
Not much, but I know about storytelling. I know peanuts. So,
Exactly.
so yeah,
Yeah. So going back to your career, I gotta ask, like, when you search for a new comic artist, when you have the space and everything, what were the requirements?
laughter. Yeah, it had to make me laugh.
Nice.
Yeah. One cartoonist was giving a talk at, I think it was Politics and Prose, and he didn't say who wrote the letter, the email, but he said one of his happiest days was when he got this email after sending his submissions out and just hearing nothing or getting rejections. He said he got this one email who said, "I've read your submission, and I have to say I think it's pretty funny." And I went, "Oh yeah, that was me," because it was pretty funny.
There you go.
So it's there's a spark, there's a reality to it that also allows for disbelief, right?
Exactly.
So it's magic,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's magic. It's the magic of film. It's the magic of stage. It's the magic of entertainment and books, where you are taken away from this moment in this time and you're put in this other world. And there's a moment where you sit back from reading this stuff and you go, "Oh, I was just somewhere else. That was awesome."
Mm-hmm. And that's honestly the best type of book. Like, just whether it's a chapter book, whether it's a comic book, that's the best type of book, where you get lost in and then you realize, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be doing something right now, you know? Like, I'm supposed to be at work right now or something.
Oh, wait, see, that is work for me.
Exactly. There you go. You're supposed to be like, wait, I was supposed to be doing something with this.
I was just in another road and I was just getting paid for it.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's
And
when
you were talking about that career, the artist, hearing rejection after rejection after rejection, and then finally someone saying, "Hey, I find this pretty funny." All I can think of is it brought me back to the Peanut strip, where just the series of strips of every time Snoopy submitted a novel or every time Snoopy submitted something, and just hearing the letters and Charlie Brown just being, "Do you even want to hear this one?" Or or him just like, "Put it in the pile." And like there's the pile like up to like the top of the strip or something.
Yeah. Actually, it's very funny because Sparky would kind of try out his setups on people, and every once in a while, you'd find your punchline in a comic strip, and he'd be like, "Oh, wow, that was his setup in my punchline." I got the original. Well, I didn't get the original. That's a different story. I didn't get that original, but I got a different original. And I think it's because some people were mixed up. Somebody else with the name Amy got my original.
Ooh.
I don't know if it was him or if it was his, the staff, his administrative assistants. Okay. Got it mixed up, but yeah. Doesn't matter. I got an original. I'm happy.
There you go. I'll also say, another strip just popped into my mind. I remember this because I had this framed in my room. There's Snoopy on the doghouse, laying on one side saying, "My life's become a bore lately. Every day, same thing, same in, same out. What I need is a change." Going from this way to this way.
I remember that. I don't remember that from reading it when it came in, but I remember reading it. I helped edit the 60th anniversary book. So
Ooh.
I went through as much as I possibly could of the material. And so a lot of it, here's one thing you might not know about Sparky, but he had, I think he had an eidetic memory or pretty close to it. So I was mentioning to him during one visit that I had come across a comic strip that I had pulled and made a quick copy of for my dad. And it was a Father's Day comic with Snoopy as the main character. And Snoopy is talking about the rabbits. And my dad had rabbits in the backyard, and there was one day I was like, oh, look at the cute bunnies. And my dad was like, where? And they were in the garden eating his broccoli. And he said, I'm going to get my gun. And I said, no, you're not. So this was, this whole storyline about Snoopy and his dad and the rabbits. And I was explaining that to Sparky. There's actually a subtext. There was like a plot line and a subplot line. And Sparky remembered the gag. It was from 20 years prior. It's that old. At least 20 years prior. And he said, oh yeah, and this and this and this happened. And then we walked into his favorite bookstore in Santa Rosa. He walked over to the rack that held his compilation books. He picked up, he kind of went, they went, this one. I kid you not, it was that fast. This one.
Wow.
That was it. That was the gag.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm learning so much about my favorite cartoon artist. That's awesome. So I gotta ask, speaking of learning, what is the biggest lesson you've taken away from your career?
Never assume.
Never
It's my first rule of editing. I break it all the time, and every time I do, I'm like, I broke my first rule of editing. Never assume. I'm really sorry. That's when I'm apologizing to the cartoonists. Never assume.
Never assume. Always have open expectation. Always have an open mind.
Also, I'll always check everything. Like it's the same goes for editing a column. If you're editing a column, never assume. Like go check it. Go check it. Make sure you check it. Yeah.
So never assume. I like that rule.
Yeah. First rule of editing: never assume.
Noted. So, buddy, I've got 2 more questions for you to make this an official Buddycast. The first one is brought to us by my buddy Jonas Kane at #Positivity, who wants to know, in your own words, what does it mean to be someone's buddy?
So I've been thinking about this a lot, and the best way I can describe it is, there are people who I care about whose political views are diametrically opposed to mine, but who I know are good people, and who I would drop, if they said they needed me, I'd drop everything and do what I could to help them. And I know if I said, I really need you, I need your help, can you help me? They would do the same.
Exactly. A wonderful definition. Because you're right, buddies are that people. Buddies are the people that in a heartbeat, if they text you right now, we need a favor. Hey, sorry, I have to go.
Yeah, except in the days of AI that we're in now, you have to be really careful about that. You need a safe word, right?
Exactly.
Your safe word is like, is this really Amy? And I don't know what my safe word would be. Probably my dog's name. That's what I'm guessing.
Nice. So the final question I have for you tonight is what we call the ultimate Buddycast buddy question. You ready for this one?
I don't know. Lay it on me.
For anyone out there who wants a career like yours, who wants to be a cartoon editor, who wants to work for such a notable paper like you do, what is your advice to them?
Okay, well, the first thing you should know is I don't work for the Washington Post anymore.
Okay.
I am involved with a startup called Counterpoint.
Nice.
So, and I just got everything for me was serendipitous. You know, I lucked into that syndicate job. Somebody was leaving the Washington Post, and the guy who became my boss, Alan Shearer at the Washington Post, had met me before and sought me out. I was actually I was living on a sailboat, 44-foot sailboat. I had sailed through the Bahamas and come back, and I was on my sailboat living in Jacksonville, Florida, and he sought me out, and it was just all this serendipitous stuff that was lucky. And all I would say is make the connections, do what you love. Unfortunately, don't try to pursue a newspaper job per se. You want to do what you love and find the outlet, find the medium that makes your outlet pay, makes what you love to do pay you. Right? Right now, I'm not very good at that because I'm doing what I love to do. I'm making a lot of money.
Yeah.
I did make good money, and I had a great time. I can't, I'm like an addict. I can't stop. But I'm in a position where I can do that. I'm 61 years old. My husband's retired. We live in a relatively inexpensive place, so we can do that. My advice is draw what you love, write what you love, do the things that you love, and then think about how you can monetize them. How can you make money out of this? How can you get gratification out of it? Are you happy just putting it out there and having everyone see it, like on social media? Is there a way to turn it into money through newsletters or websites or whatever? It's always about, are you happy writing what you're writing, drawing what you're drawing, just doing what you're doing. I'm terribly lucky to have been working with all these really talented people. It's like, it's 1 degree of separation. I'm not so creative myself, but I'm like, oh, I've touched this creative person. This is really awesome.
Number one, you just described everything that I put into my show. It's about what you love. It's about talking about what you love. It's about talking to someone like you who has this amazing career and just finding the passion in it. And number two, you just reminded me of one of my favorite sayings, and I've said this on the show a dozen times, but I'll say it again. Man who works for passion is far richer than man who works for money.
Right.
Because how many people out there have a 9-to-5 job that's paying them, thousands of dollars?
You're lucky if it's 9 to 5. I mean,
exactly.
A lot of people who are, making all that money are working way longer hours. I was working actually way longer hours for a long time, but I was doing something I loved.
But then there's people like my grandfather who actually worked for a newspaper himself. We have in our city called the Erie Times News.
Yep.
And that was his passion. It wasn't the wealthiest job for him. Like, it paid the bills. It it got him enough to put his family through and everything like that. But at the same time, it wasn't like he was coming home with, $20,000 a paycheck or something like that. It wasn't like he was, it wasn't like he was buying the luxury cars or the, fancy gadget of the week or something. He was just getting by.
My dad was a civil engineer for the state of New York. The best thing about his job was he was outside almost all the time because he was with the canals and waterways, and he was in the spring, he was out ensuring that there was a clear channel in the Erie Canal system for the boats to go through. In the winter, he was measuring the snow content so that when the water, this was back when we actually had snow that stuck around. You're in Erie, Pennsylvania, so you know about this.
Tell me all about it.
We don't have snow that sticks around anymore, really. But he had to measure the snow content so they'd know what the runoff in the spring was going to be. And this was this was a great job for him. He had an opportunity to move into a desk job, and my mother basically was the one who knew that he would die on the vine. He would never be able to stand and do a desk job. He just didn't have it in him. He was outside. That's where he wanted to be.
Nice. But you're absolutely right. If you love your job, then it's not really, is it really work? Is it really that, So
yeah. It was there. The one thing that I will say is that I was kind of a specialist initially with United Futures Syndicate. And the best part of my job when I switched to the Washington Post was my boss, Alan Shearer, he let me do everything. And I loved it. I got to write promotional copy, the press releases. I handled the photo sessions for the columnists and helped design the brochures. I went out on sales calls with the sales reps. That was all in addition to just the day-to-day editing of the comic strips. When I said I had an interest in trying something, he was like, have at it. We were with the Washington Post, which was a big company, but we were a small group within a big company. So many hands made light work.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a lot of fun. It was by far so much more interesting because I didn't feel as pigeonholed. I was helping get puzzle people. You and I talked earlier about Merle Regal, who was probably the best puzzle constructor who ever lived. And his brain just was firing on 10 cylinders at a time and in all different directions. And it was fascinating to listen to him and watch him, and being able to say, yeah, I worked with Merle Regal. That's an awesome thing too. I mean, it's not just the comics. It's not just the editorial cartoons, which I absolutely adore. It's not just columns. It's, puzzles. It's the whole kit and caboodle, sales, promotion. Yeah. And one of the other things I used to do was I would review the royalty statements. That was in numbers. And I had all these facts, and particularly with United Feature Syndicate, where we had 40 different features that I was dealing with. There were 40 different contracts, right? So you're having to remember what are the deal terms with these contracts. And so you get the royalty statement, and I'm picking up the phone and calling Cincinnati and going, hey, there's a problem with this royalty statement. And please believe me, numbers are not my forte. But remembering deal terms was pretty good.
Love it.
It's pretty good at that.
Mm-hmm. Well, Amy, thank you so much for stopping on Buddycast and being a buddy. You're not a guest on the show. You're a buddy. You're an official buddy.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be a buddy. Thank you so much for what you're doing. And it's just a great pleasure to talk to you.
Of course. And you're welcome back anytime.
Oh, great. I might take you up on that.
Well, sounds great. But Amy, I have one favor to ask you before we end this episode. First off, stick around for a minute. We'll chat for a minute afterwards.
Okay.
But I have one favor to ask you. If you can promise me this, whatever you're going to do today, tomorrow, next week, next month, or even next year, please promise me you're going to go out and you're going to go be someone's buddy.
Of course. That's one of my favorite things to do. I do.
That's our saying on it.
I try to do that every day. Yep.
That's our saying on Buddycast. Go be someone's buddy.
Yep. I will do that. You can bet on it.
Love it. For my buddies out there, this is Amy Lago. Please read your comic strips. Pick up the newspaper.
Editorial cartoons, columnists, everybody.
Yes.
Read the paper.
Pick up your newspaper and read. That's all I ask you tonight.
Please.
I'm your host, Nick Sorensen. Thank you for
Thanks,
joining
Nick.
us on another episode of everybody's favorite show.
Well, the days are going fast, buddy, we've got to make them last, buddy, before they've all gone past, buddy, tune in to Buddycast. No, don't be naughty, go make it, buddy, here on Buddycast.